Welcome everyone. My name is Utemishwa Madina Salihianovna. I am a public figure and an educator. Today I would like to discuss the issue of Japan's national sovereignty and the unprecedented use of nuclear arsenal by the United States against the civilian population of the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This act of military aggression by the United States not only violated international law, but also jeopardized the very existence of the Japanese nation. Additionally, it is interesting to consider the hypothesis of the possible use of high-tech weapons of mass destruction by ancient civilizations, which may have led to catastrophic consequences in the past. Let's start with the following question. Does Japan currently possess national sovereignty? Allow me to outline my position, according to which Japan's sovereignty is significantly limited. I will now provide reasoned arguments in support of this claim. Japan has not possessed sovereignty for almost a decade, starting from the end of the Second World War. According to the current Japanese constitution adopted in 1947, particularly Article 98, the state is obligated to faithfully implement the international agreements it has entered into, and to adhere to established norms of international law. According to this article of the Constitution, international specialized organizations such as the World Health Organization, WHO, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, the World Bank, and other similar entities have recommendations that take precedence in Japan's legal framework and are mandatory to follow. The lack of sovereignty is also evidenced by the presence of American military bases on Japanese territory. American military bases are situated in various parts of Japan, and their presence began after the Second World War, specifically in 1945. It is likely that we might not have witnessed the current Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's sharp statements regarding the nuclear threat from Russia if it were not for the influence of the United States. Consider the statement by President Vladimir Putin of the Russian Federation, where he remarked, "Why should we need a world in which there is no Russia?" This message has sparked various accusatory remarks towards the Russian Federation. It is important to note the following. Firstly, these words were not directed at Japan, given that Japan does not possess sovereignty, as previously mentioned. Secondly, Japan does not have a nuclear arsenal. This message was directed at the United States, a country that initiates international conflicts and intends to complete disintegration and eventual destruction of the Russian Federation. The United States is a pioneer in the development of nuclear weapons and the only country that has used them to intimidate other nations. It was specifically against Japan that the United States deployed nuclear weapons. Perhaps Japanese leadership should more carefully consider whom to address such statements to. It is important to emphasize that neither the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics nor its successor, the Russian Federation, has ever used nuclear weapons in world history. The only country that has deployed nuclear weapons, as previously noted, it is the United States. The official stance of the United States regarding the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki is the following. These military operations were considered necessary strategic measures for the swift conclusion of the Second World War. According to official rhetoric, these actions were aimed at minimizing potential human casualties by preventing a protracted military conflict. The American side also argues that the nuclear strikes were a response to the aggressive foreign policy of the Japanese Empire, specifically the military operation against the United States naval base at Pearl Harbor. It's worth noting that before the attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States foreign policy strategy was already geared towards potentially entering the war. There was an understanding that the Soviet Union was on track to defeat the Nazis on the Western Front and the Japanese Kwantan Army in the East. The United States leadership aimed to ensure its involvement in the anticipated victory and took steps to shape public opinion in favor of entering the war. This was necessary because American society was not ready to engage in a military conflict that was geographically distant from the United States. As part of this foreign policy strategy, the United States used tools like economic sanctions and the freezing of financial assets. These economic measures put significant pressure on the Japanese Empire. Let's look at the analysis provided by Kazuhiko Togo, a well-known Japanese political scientist and diplomat. Togo offers an interpretation of events suggesting that the Japanese Empire was compelled to undertake the military operation against Pearl Harbor due to what he describes as provocative actions by the United States. According to Togo, the diplomatic document known as the Hall Note, delivered to Japanese diplomats at the end of 1941, was an ultimatum to Japan. This served as a catalyst for Japan to adopt a more aggressive stance towards the United States. Historical events and Kazuhiko Togo's statements suggest that the United States foreign policy strategy involved creating a geopolitical ring around the Japanese Empire, which significantly limited the range of possible actions for Japanese leadership and pushed it towards striking the American naval base. Such a development provided the United States with a legitimate basis to enter the military conflict and subsequently carry out strategic bombings of Japanese cities. Currently, the United States is pursuing a similar strategy against the Russian Federation, but in a more aggressive form. Russia is facing economic, political, informational, and military aggression aimed at its complete destruction. However, I would like to remind Western countries, particularly the United States, you are dealing with a nuclear power and do not understand the depth of the character and spirit of the Russian people. If history does not teach you, let me remind you of the heroic defense of Smolensk from 1609 to 1611, when Polish-Lithuanian invaders occupied the fortress and had breached its defences. But the city's inhabitants showed incredible resilience by refusing to surrender and blowing themselves up along with the enemies. I would also like to remind you of the heroes of the Great Patriotic War, when Russian soldiers, even when wounded, did not surrender and gave their lives while taking the lives of the enemies of their enemies. And now Russians will also not surrender. And if Russia finds itself in a similar situation, I can assure you that it won't be good for you either, if this planet even survives. And don't think that the ocean will save you. Looking back at recent history, it's also important to consider more ancient periods. We are all familiar with the great structures of antiquity, such as the pyramids of Egypt, the ruins of Baalbek in Lebanon, and the Yanshan quarry in China, among many other ancient constructions. It's truly astonishing how these ancient civilizations managed to build such grand monuments using primitive tools like stone implements and bronze hammers, according to official history. However, there is an alternative theory suggesting that these structures were built by advanced civilizations with cutting-edge technology. This raises a number of questions. Where are these civilizations now? Why did they not continue their development? Some theories propose that a global catastrophe triggered by war led to an ice age and a shift in the Earth's axis, causing humanity to revert to a primitive state. In light of this, I have a message for the United States to maintain our society at its current level of development and ensure its future progress, as well as to preserve our planet. We must avoid conflicts and wars similar to those the United States is involved in around the world. We should strive for cooperation and friendship because we have no alternative planets to relocate to. Even there are habitable planets in other galaxies. The distances are millions of light years away, making intergalactic travel inaccessible to humans with a lifespan of about 100 years. In conclusion, I want to emphasize that the future of humanity depends on our ability to live in peace and cooperate with one another. History teaches us that great civilizations disappear when conflict and war take precedence. Instead of destroying, we should create and unite for the common good and to preserve our planet, the Earth.